Welcome again, guys. Another interesting session. A story of 150 years old with the Cayzer family. We are honored today to have Jamie Cayzer-Colvin with us in here in a session to tell us some really interesting stories in here. We're talking about World War II, you're talking about shipping, you're talking about aviation, and there's an Oscar in the mix. Thank you very much, sir, for blessing us with the session today. We'd love to hear your story and the family's story. I think we'll do great to the audience, sharing some real life stories on how families have sustained themselves and crossed many hurdles to be what they are today. Probably we'll start with the history, 150 years, that's a lot.
Well, thank you for asking me to do this, and always delighted to share our story. My family, the Cayzer family, originally come from the very southwest of England. The Cayzer name, people say, that doesn't sound very English, and it's not English, it's British.
Okay.
So remember, the English came from sort of Saxony. Okay. So we were the people that were in Britain before the Anglo-Saxons came, which is basically those people went to Wales and Cornwall, and they're a little non-conformist in their nature, which is a theme that runs through my family. Okay. And until my great-great-grandfather, most of my family had been clergymen, or academics, or factors. They were quite bookish, and my great-great-great-grandfather came to London and he set a school up in a little village called Poplar, which today you would call Canary Wharf. And this was the centre of shipping in the Port of London. And he wanted his son to follow him, to come and be a teacher. He was also ordained and a priest as well. And but his son, Charles, had been seeing all these sailors getting off the ships, and they were talking about the Orient. They were talking about all these magical places abroad. And he said, you know, Dad, school, that sounds really boring. I want to go to, you know, India. I want to go and see, I want to go to the Orient. I want to go and explore these places. So as a young man, age 16, he went to Bombay, and when he arrived there, he obviously knew a lot about the shipping because he'd been grown up in the middle of the shipping world, and he got a job working for a shipping company. And roll the story forward, after a decade or so, he decided to set up his own company. And he created his first shipping company called the Clan Line. And the Clan Line went on to be the largest cargo carrying shipping line in the world. And that was a period when Britain in the 19th century really had a monopoly on shipping. And so it was an incredibly good time to be investing into that sort of sector and building. You know, Poplar, I describe Poplar to people, it was a bit like the Palo Alto of the 19th century. That was where really some exciting entrepreneurial things were happening. The family stayed in shipping, so through 3 generations. So my great-great-grandfather died in 1916. His son, August, my great-grandfather, took over. He died in 1942. His younger brother took over a short while, and then my grandfather took over the business in the 1950s. And my grandfather basically realized that we had to pivot because up until the Second World War, aviation wasn't a threat to the maritime industry. But during the Second World War, a huge amount of investment had been made into aviation, improving aviation, plus also building a huge amount of infrastructure. And there was a lot of redundancy. There were a lot of pilots. And if you've ever been a pilot, you probably don't want to go and sit behind a desk for the rest of your life. You want to carry on flying. So clearly, high margin goods were going to be removed, traditional maritime forms of transport, and go to aviation. So we could see this happening, and so we began to invest into aviation. The other thing that happened at that time is that obviously Britain, after the Second World War, a lot of it had been destroyed with bombing raids and the likes. And the very first private equity fund was formed in the world called 3i, still around today. And that was formed by the government to bring private capital into rebuilding Britain. And families like mine and many others were encouraged to invest into Britain to help rebuild it. For that first 75 years, we were totally about shipping. And then we began to diversify. So we had the aviation, and then we got into agriculture, into industrials, chemicals, financial services. And at the same time, also in 1953, we took the company public. And at that time, the company was called British Commonwealth. And that went on to go and be one of the biggest companies in Great Britain. And if you look in the 1980s, it had a whole range of businesses. And if you try to make sense, why have you got this and why have you got that? I mean, you just couldn't. It was sort of like we got fingers in everywhere. But there were a number of things then happening in the 1980s. So one, the third generation, my grandfather was beginning to hand over the reins to the fourth generation of leadership. We also were having a huge amount of change in the sort of business environment in the UK. A big bang was happening. A lot of things like insider dealing became illegal. My grandfather said, if you don't have inside information, how on earth do you make money?
No, it's such an odd thing. Huh?
It's like, yeah, I look at it, I think, yeah.
The good old days.
The good old days. The good old days. But I mean, I think if he had to came into this environment now and trying to make money, he'd go, wow, this is really, really just so difficult. So we at that time then decided that actually we needed to pivot and change. We needed to set up a dedicated family office, because I think when you move beyond the third generation, I'm the fifth generation, the seventh generation is alive, you cease to become one family. You're a series of families with common ancestors, and therefore you need to begin to develop governance structures, corporate governance structures, family governance structures to help manage that process. Not everyone is going to go on the journey with you. In fact, it may be just only a few parts of the family that go for a third of our assets in public equity. A third of our assets are in private companies that we actually own and control. And then the final third are in private equity funds, predominantly in North America and the lower mid-market, but also in Asia in more growth strategies. And I go back to when I talk to these funds and they say, well, this is very, very different from the maritime world. And I say, actually, it's almost identical, because what my great-great-grandfather did was that he gave a pile of assets in the form of a ship, the cargo, which was, he was effectively a commodity trader. Then there'll be some people buying passage and some small items buying passage on the ship. He would give it to a captain and his team, and they would sail over the horizon and return 9 months later having traded around the world. And one part of the cargo was the captain's, and that was called the captain's carry. And now in private equity funds, the performance fee comes out in a carry. This is where the term comes from. So, it's about, it's about finding really good people and then giving them the resource and the capital, and then giving them the autonomy to go on and make the returns. And that's what we've been doing for 150 years. And let's hope we can do it for another 150 years.
Saying that, how involved actually, or the future generation? Is there an involvement from the future generation? How would you do that? Understanding that you're probably now a big family.
Yep.
So I wonder first, before getting into the future generation, how is your relationship as an extended family? Do you communicate? Do you gather up? I mean, is there like a communication and common shared values, or is it more structured now and it's more like,
It's quite structured. So we have a lot of quite formal structure, annual meetings. I tend to think of it in like a Venn diagram, and there are three circles. And so you have the sort of the investment management, which is obviously principally Caledonia. There is then the sort of the wealth management and the sort of financial services supporting it, which is the family office, so helping you do tax returns and all that sort of type of things. And then we need to get something emotional, because we've only just met. I'm not sure whether IRRs get you excited. They do get me quite excited, but but trying to tell the younger generation, here's an IRR of whatever, and they look at you and think, really,
Okay.
So how do you get emotion into something? Because operating companies, families with operating companies very often hold on to them too long because they're emotionally engaged with them.
Yeah, that's true.
So how do we get actually emotion? And I use heritage. So if you come to our offices, and you'll be very welcome, we'd lovely to host you there in London, you come in and you think, this doesn't look like a normal office. This feels, it's contemporary, but there's lots of heritage around you. And we use that heritage to engage with the family, and the family really respond to this. And we'll set up interesting sort of dinners where they can come in and just informally gather. And that works very, very well. And in fact, we're finding that not only are the family involved and keen on it, but so are our employees. And we find that whenever, in fact, actually it really develops our brand, that whenever people that we may be investing with, I mean, you may have a fund that is over from North America and they're doing 35 meetings in Europe in a week. They're absolutely chin strapped. You know, it's a hard slog trying to raise money. They'll remember our meeting. And they'll remember our meeting because it's been different. And very often the engagement, you know, so often I just want to get to know them. I'll say, you know, don't tell me about what you do, just tell me about you.
Interesting.
I want to get to know the person first, and then we can work out whether we can.
And how often do you like the person, by the way?
Well, it's a very good question. I like to get to know people slowly. Okay. You know, because it feels more genuine. You know, the person
which goes opposite to the market.
Yeah, I know. I think like that was sort of speed dating. I'm not very good at speed dating. But I think my team, you know, I think I look across all our team. You know, empathy is something that we really do look for within people, and to engage, you know, and be interesting. I mean, I always say, you know, whenever you're doing a business travel, always travel in pairs, because you're sort of in the zone, and then you can
get to know the other.
You get to know the and you also. You can read people much better if there's two of you, and you get a sort of feedback cycle. The other thing which I encourage them to do is that when you're going to travel a lot, go and do something cultural during the week. Because then when you're sitting down with somebody from that region, you can say, well, actually, you know, I just went to go and see this, or we did that, etc. And you can have a conversation that is not about the business, but it's about their culture, the location that you're at, or something like that. And it just opens up a whole different line of conversation.
We have an Arabic saying, which translates to, if you want to know someone, travel with them.
Well, I like that. Will you tell me what it is in Arabic?
That would be إذا تحب تعرف شخص تسافر وياه. Okay, that's
I'm gonna have to I'm gonna have to listen to this and learn.
So basically,
I like that.
If you want to know someone, you have to travel with them, because then you go through different angles of life together and new locations. And there where you know a true friend from love. I love that you brought it up very elegantly, so I thought I'll throw this in. So is there a structure in the family whereby, or a method in the family whereby there is something for the new generation for them to be able to participate if they wanted, or is the family a bit distant now from like the running of the business?
No, I mean, I'm in the business and they're on a daily basis, full time. One of my other cousins just retired full time. So the three of us who are in either executive or non-executive roles on the investment company side. There are five of us who are involved in non-executive roles at the family office sort of side of things. But then we have a program, we call it the SEAS program. It's basically about the next generation and shareholder engagement. And so we have a junior committee made up of the next generation that we have regular dinners with them, bringing in members of the Caledonia Investment team to have dinner with them, but also then to discuss how we should be communicating what we're doing. We run intern programs which family can engage with, and we're constantly, I mean, that's why, you know, something like a Camden event is a great event to come along and meet, you know, some really inspiring people who are much more advanced than this, and we can learn from them. And I literally come along with a large notebook and I say, well, I'm going to copy that, that sounds a really good idea, and learn from what other people are doing, because I think that's one of the best ways. You know, some things suit some families, not other families, and you know, what was maybe good for my generation may not be good for the present generation. You know, if I ever try and email the next generation, they never respond. I have to send them a text message saying, by the way, you have an email, please have a look at your inbox. You know?
Do you see them interested, or are they?
So my eldest daughter, who's 29, I mean, she was here last year at this Camden event. She attends quite a few family office events that I go to. She runs an intern program. She's a film producer, so she has an independent career of her own.
We should collaborate. And yes, the Oscar story, don't forget.
I'll come back to the Oscar story, yes. I mean, our intern program is quite extensive. I mean, last year we had 1,200 applicants there are only 12 people involved in the program. It's very intense, one month long. But it's a great event, and it ends up with a sort of Dragon's Den where we go and get very senior people from the City of London to come along and sit on the panel. And this is great for undergraduates, really good experience. And the family, you know, we'll send members of the family through. What we're trying to do is see whether future members of the family could be they could have leadership roles, but they could also just be about training them to be good shareholders. And my youngest daughter, I mean, she's an artist, and she is determined to be, without doubt, the best shareholder going. And she says, I'm going to be the best shareholder by asking the most difficult questions of you. And she knows my weak spot, so she's very, very good at that.
I am currently experimenting with the method, both in my school, which is called Citizen School, and I'm doing it with my family and a couple of other families. What I'm experimenting with is the venture studio style of inducing experience and trying to capture the natural leaders, basically. And that is through not really involving them in the main business of the family, because I think that occasionally becomes disruptive. What I do is that I will get a small amount of money and put on a team, predominantly family members, and a couple of professionals, basically, and ask them to develop 3 to 4 companies within 3 years at the same time. And what that does, and that each one of them plays a different role in every company. So one can be the finance manager of this company, but then can be the CEO of the other company, and then the sales guy or the marketing guy in the third or the fourth company. And what that does is that it forces them to accumulate so much knowledge in a very short time period, and more importantly, taste failure, because most of them will fail.
So important.
And statistically speaking, one would survive.
Right.
Statistically. So you get them a lot of taste of failure, a lot of experience in a very short time period and across the whole spectrum of activities necessary in a business, and then potentially taste success. And through that, you see leaders and you see people that are taken seriously, and they will get a feeling whether this is for them or not. And of that, then with minimum harm on the main business, you potentially get a couple of these guys that we'd be happy to onboard, or you might actually get a nice business added to the family business, and they would lead on it and get their shares on it. So that is a method that I enjoy, and I apply the same in my school, actually, for future generations. So that's another note, potentially.
I've heard similar sort of stories from a North American family that's here, and I think it's a really good idea. If I look back at my own learning, my best learning is when I've made mistakes. Older generations saying, don't do that, it'd be wrong. I said, no, they don't know what they're talking about, do they? But then, when you make it yourself,
they had that idea. How do you see the future of the family?
That is a very, very good question. I think the family, they are very engaged in business. I think given the scale of the business, the family engagement with it may change a little bit. And I think one of the things that we've done is that, so Will, my cousin, and I, under sort of our tenureship, I think we've institutionalized a lot of our internal processes. One that we haven't institutionalized is the family engagement with the family investment company, Caledonia, because Will and I have been in the business on a day-to-day basis. But I think that's something that we need to think a little bit about. One, because it gives the family a clear path into the business, and also it's very clear to all the other people, very, very capable people that we've got in Caledonia. We haven't got somebody from the family just jumping in and stealing a job opportunity from them.
Okay.
It's got to be a really good partnership. And I think, people have got to understand that there is value added by both sides. So that I see as a real challenge that, my next birthday is 60. I hope to work certainly for another decade full time. And, this will be a real mission to really get this over to the next generation. Thinking beyond the next generation, well, that's not my job. It's
probably their job.
It's their job,
it's
exactly.
Their job.
I think you should, I think if you try and be too clever and try and sort of make decisions that might last multiple generations, you may not be able to do that. I think that's but I think, to me, I sit, I think within families that there is a very basic golden rule that I have. You must basically educate the next generation to manage the wealth and not let the wealth manage them. Because if the wealth manage them, they become entitled. And that is the cancer to all family wealth. That's when you go from, from clogs to clogs in 3 generations. That terminology is often referred to in many different cultures, but it's very often family wealth lasts just 3 generations. And that's because generally entitlement has eroded.
I'll take that as the word of wisdom for the session.
Okay.
May I ask, in your opinion, and this is a very wide terminology, what glues the family and the business together?
I think success is definitely one. Financial success, one, because they financially want to be involved in it. But also
they get the checks.
But they also, exactly, they get the checks are very important. You must never forget the checks. But they also get some pride in that. Okay. And they like to be associated. People like to be associated with a winning team. And so if it's doing well, they like to be associated with it. But I come back to the heritage angle, is that trying to get this sort of aspect of a sort of emotional engagement in it. That is also, I think, very strong, and that people want to be involved in it. I mean, the family office is a physical building. We've always wanted to make a big thing about it, so that people can come in there. They may be just passing by and just pop in and come and just walk the floor and say hello to colleagues. Frequently, particularly my two daughters. I just say, look, if you ever walk past the office and you don't come in and say hello, you're in trouble. Just come in, and even if it's just to say hello to the receptionist, that's so important.
I was, in the last couple of days, I was contemplating buying a farm for the family.
Yeah.
You just gave me a great idea.
Yeah.
So if I can grow it as to be the heritage, if it hosts the history of the family.
That'd be lovely.
And where everybody can come in and enjoy the space and connect with the brand, which is the family brand.
Yes, exactly.
Thank you for the idea.
No, well.
I'd love to receive you. So probably I'll give the broker a call now.
Well, absolutely. I'd like to come and see the farm. Yeah.
That would be fantastic. No. I always ask this question. So if you have a time machine, and it could take you across the 150 years, what would be the couple of things you'd like to change?
I would, one, which is not a change, but I'd love to go back to the founder and say, by the way, I'm 5th generation, 7th generations live. What you did was fantastic.
So thank the guy.
Thank you.
Okay.
Huge thank you, because without, maybe other generations would have done it, but he definitely did start something. So I think we have to first go along and say some thanks to him.
And can you imagine? I just on that. So I don't usually stop the speaker on at this point in time. A lot that has happened. Much thanks. I mean, my father has done a great job taking the family from nothing to something. But my grandfather, step-grandfather actually, was the first English teacher in what is today United Arab Emirates. And because he taught my father English in a country that didn't have an education system at the time, has made a huge difference in him. Just a decision by some ancestor could change a lot.
Could change a lot,
So just to, I thought of sharing this with you. Well, so the other point.
Which actually, that leads in very well to what I worry about going back and changing something, because when I wake up in the morning, I'm a happy person. I worry that if you went back and changed something, what would be the consequence of that?
Okay, if you are happy, keep it that way.
So I don't want to upset where we are now. I'm lucky. I have good health. I have a very happy marriage. I've got 2 wonderful daughters. I've got a nice son-in-law. I would like some grandchildren. I think one of the golden relationships is that grandparent-grandchild, and I had that with my grandfather. And particularly around the corporate side of things. So I'd love to be able to sort of share that with a grandchild. I think. Really, I mean, it's not a very satisfactory answer to say I actually wouldn't change anything.
That's
but
amazing.
Actually, I wouldn't.
Amazing. So thanking an ancestor for doing a great job and taking a leap of faith and doing something different is a legitimate answer. I'll give it that way. So thank you so much.
Well, no, thank you.
For joining us, giving me the time, sharing this amazing story with everyone else. I'm definitely sure it will add a lot of value to a lot of people. For them to contemplate on and see how they could do a similar job. So thank you very much. I truly appreciate it.
Pleasure. Absolutely delightful. Great.